So we are now going to take a little bit of a more extended deep dive into the forecast for the rest of the entire weekend, because as you just heard, if you were with us in the shows, we have a lot to unpack. Not only do we have that winter weather potential on kind of overnight tonight, early Sunday morning, but then we also have the severe weather potential Sunday afternoon. So me and meteorologist Alex Pry are both here, and we are going to kind of drop down the forecast into a little bit more of an intricate level and talk about the details for the rest of today, overnight tonight, and then all day on Sunday. So starting with the current conditions across the area, we have got some widespread cloud cover, and we've had some widespread cloud cover for a good couple of days now. So most of today is going to feel a lot like the last couple of days. You'll have this cloud cover out there. Temperatures will be somewhat warm, not necessarily super warm for this time of year, but not necessarily freezing. We'll be somewhere in the 40s and 50s through the rest of this afternoon. But the wedge pattern that we talk about so often here in central Georgia will begin to build in, and that will be the driving force for some of the prolonged winter weather conditions in northeast Georgia, and then some of the winter weather conditions here in our area. If you're not familiar with the wedge, we do talk about that feature a lot here in our region because it comes our way a lot. But all it is some flow that gets hit up against the Appalachian Mountains and has nowhere to go except for down here into Georgia. So all of this northeasterly flow gets funneled into our area. Cooler air that kind of reinforces itself as it sets up across the state. Now, normally it's kind of the strongest here in the portions of northeast Georgia, but we do often see this creep into our region as well, mainly up in our northern counties. So that's kind of why we talk about it so often here in our area. Now, the wedge is going to be a really big part of this forecast because where the wedge is the strongest is where the impacts from this freezing rain are going to be the strongest as well. So this is kind of a strange shape that this extreme impacts takes place, but it's not a coincidence. Again, this is the shape of where that wedge will be building in the strongest up here in northeast Georgia. So they are looking at extreme impacts, and then the impacts go down the further south that you go. So North Georgia, all of North Georgia is talking about a high impact from the freezing rain event. But as we creep into central Georgia here, we are talking more about a low to moderate impact. So you're going to see the watches and warnings here in just a moment, and you're going to see that our watch, or our advisory, excuse me, goes for kind of our northern counties. That includes Washington, Hancock, Putnam, Jasper, Jones, or Baldwin, Jones, Monroe, but it does not include places that are kind of outlined in the edge of this low end severity risk here. That includes portions of northern Wilkinson, northern Twiggs, northern Bibb, northern Crawford, and northern Upson as well. I want to point those areas out in specific because my general rule of thumb for this particular event is if you are in a county north of I-16, I would kind of highlight you in this yellow category. Now, the yellow category is very, very, very minor accumulation. We're talking trace amounts potentially at the highest points, maybe up to around 1/10 of an inch. So that's not going to be super impactful, but if you have to do some driving early on Sunday morning and you are in some of those yellow shaded areas, you may encounter a couple of areas of patchy ice. Now, as we go into this orange shaded area, these are the areas that are actually in our advisory. That's where we're talking about up to 1/4 of an inch, and meteorologist Alex Pry will explain here in a little bit. 1/4 of an inch of ice is where we start talking about moderate impacts. That's when you can start seeing minor power outages and more complications out on the road. So that's kind of the true impact, but I do want to highlight this kind of yellow shaded area because they're not outlined in any sort of watch or advisory, but we could still see some really minor accumulations here in that area that could still make traveling early on Sunday morning a little bit difficult. So that's kind of the progression of how this goes here. And then of course, things are going to be a lot stronger up in North Georgia. In the high impact area, we're talking about 1/4 to 1/2 an inch of ice. And then in the extreme impact area, we're talking about 1/2 an inch to 1 inch of ice accumulation. And we're talking about some gusty winds with this as well. That means we're talking widespread, probably long duration power outages in this area here in purple. So that's where the main concern is. And probably if you're wondering why you're hearing so much about this winter weather event, it is because of the impacts that it's going to bring to North Georgia. But we still want to be diligent and highlight the impacts that we're going to have here in our area as well. Because like I said, the wedge will still stretch into portions of our region, probably right along I-16. You can kind of see how it's setting up just by looking at the temperature difference this morning as well. We've got mid-40s up in our northern counties, down in our southern counties. We're already in the low 50s, so a little bit of a spread. And again, that's the wedge that's building into our area, causing that difference. But through the day today, it's really not something that we have to pay attention to. Your Saturday is going to be fairly calm and fairly quiet. Like the last couple of days, you may catch a stray shower or two, but you're not really going to impact, or you're not going to encounter any sort of winter weather through the day today. Even if you're in the northern counties, temperatures this afternoon will still be above freezing, likely somewhere in the low 50s. It's not until late night tonight and really early morning Sunday that the freezing rain starts to kick in. So we will time that out here on the Future View in just a second, but I want to show you where the current satellite and radar stands at the moment. We've got cloud cover across our area, 1 or 2 stray showers, and other than that, it's quiet. But up in North Georgia, again, where that risk is a little bit higher, we're already starting to see some freezing rain begin to settle in. Mainly over here in the northwest corner of the state. They also were outlined to have a little bit of an earlier timeline than the rest of the state as the system kind of moves in from the west into this area. So we did have some reports in the National Weather Service chat. They are already seeing some accumulating freezing rain here in these counties, and they will again continue to do that as we go through the rest of this evening and overnight tonight. Big picture, I think it's important to take you out to this view every now and then. This is the system that we're dealing with. This is a large-scale, multi-state system, and it's going to bring a lot of widespread impacts to a lot of different portions of the area. I mentioned this earlier, but I just kind of throw it out there to show you what the other impacts are in other places. My brother lives in Lexington, Kentucky, and he told me that they are forecasted to have 2 feet of snowfall. So even if you are in the snowfall section, this is still going to be a very impactful system, and that is why it has caused so much chatter on social media, in the weather world, just in general, because this is a large scale and just highly impactful system, kind of no matter where you are as this rolls over. So with that being said, let's take it a little more locally. We'll keep talking about the impacts here in central Georgia. We've been reiterating for the last couple of days, this is mainly a northern county situation, and that is still the case. There's really been no changes to that over the last couple of days. Remember what I said, I-16 is still a good indicator. I still think a couple of counties that are not necessarily outlined in this advisory could see very light to trace amounts of freezing rain as we go throughout Sunday morning. But the main emphasis on ice accumulation will be on these counties that are here in the winter weather advisory. Now that may sound new, it actually is. As of early this morning, the National Weather Service has taken our winter storm watch up to a winter weather advisory. I don't want you to get too hung up on the terminology or the change with that. It's overall not a major change. It's just because we're kind of entering that 24-hour window of when we will actually see the impacts. Kind of similar from when we go to a severe thunderstorm watch versus to a warning. We're now in the time frame where this will be occurring in those counties. The only change that I do want you to pay attention to is that Monroe County has been added to this advisory. So all of these counties were already in it for the last couple of days. They've now thrown Monroe County on there, so they could potentially see, again, between 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch as well. And then of course we still have the ice storm warning. Yesterday, the National Weather Service extended the ice storm warning from just this northeastern portion of Georgia to the entire section of northern Georgia. Almost all counties north of I-20 are included in the ice storm warning. They could see anywhere from 1/4 to an inch of ice. Remember, I told you this is going to be a very big deal for North Georgia. Here in central Georgia, I am a-okay with the forecasted amounts that we have on there, and we're forecasted to have some warmer temperatures as we go through the next couple of days as well. So we will find our way out of this much sooner than North Georgia will. So with all that being said, let's take the future view through as we go through the rest of today and then into the overnight hours tonight. Again, today, not going to be a majorly impactful day. You should still be able to go about your Saturday fairly calmly with no issues. You may encounter a shower or two, but other than that, you're not going to encounter any sort of freezing rain through the day today. Now, as we start to head into this evening, late night tonight, that's when we'll start to see the changes on the way. Heading into hours where our temperatures begin to drop below freezing, that's when these showers will begin to turn into freezing rain. So heading into kind of late night Saturday, 11 to midnight, counties, again, north of I-16, will start to see their light showers transition over into freezing rain. Most of the night tonight, all counties will kind of experience rainfall. It's just the northern ones that are going to experience a freezing rain. So this continues all throughout the early morning hours on Sunday. And I keep saying that word. I mean, that means all the way from midnight until around 10 a.m. to noon. So we'll continue to see this freezing rain into the mid to late morning hours, and then it finally starts to die down as we head into around 10 to 11 in the late morning. So that will be the freezing rain portion of Sunday morning. That most impactful time, again, will be kind of right after midnight all the way into about the late morning hours on Sunday. Then our temperatures will climb above freezing. We're going to see this freezing rain start to leave us, and things will be calm and clear just for a little bit, because as we head into the second half of Sunday, a totally different weather feature is on the way. Sunday afternoon, right after noon, we're going to see this line of organized showers and storms start to enter our area. Now what's going to happen is all the fuel here in our northern counties north of I-16 where that freezing rain is all going to be wiped out. They do not have enough severe weather potential up in that area because the temperatures are too cold. They just don't have the right kind of ingredients up in our northern counties. However, our southern counties will be in a completely different story. The wedge has not reached quite that far. The sunshine will be a little bit more out in those areas. Temperatures will be a whole lot warmer. We're talking 60s to 70s down in the southern counties. So they will have the potential for a little bit of fuel that some of these storms might need to get strong to maybe even severe. So as this line pushes across our area on the second half of the day on Sunday, we will be watching counties south of I-16 for a slight low-end severe weather potential. It's going to start in the northwestern counties and sweep across our area throughout the afternoon into the early evening on Sunday. So we don't really lose the rainfall from this until the late night hours on Sunday. See, we're still dealing with this heading into the evening, and it has not completely cleared our area again until late night Sunday night. So this is kind of an all-day Sunday situation. We have that freezing rain potential for the northern counties in the morning. In the afternoon, we have the severe weather potential for the southern counties. And then we climb into the overnight hours with plenty of moisture still out there on the ground. So heading into the overnight and kicking off Monday morning, some standing water that's out there could potentially refreeze. That's why we have that potential for early Monday morning. So Storm Prediction Center has thrown us in a level 1 of 5 risk for severe weather down in the southern counties. We'll mainly be watching for any thunderstorms that try to get strong to maybe severe. The typical severe thunderstorm stuff that we watch for, mainly gusty winds, potentially some hail, and with any sort of level 1 risk, we are watching for brief spin-up tornado chances. I get a lot of questions on what exactly that means. A brief spin-up tornado is basically a tornado that is very short-lived. You know, it spins up for just a second, travels just a little bit, and then it's gone just as quickly as it touched down. So these are not long track, long duration tornadoes that can get much, much stronger. These are usually just quick spin ups and then they lift back up kind of just as quickly as they came. So that's the potential that we would be watching for this as well. Overall, a level 1 of 5. As you know, we get those a lot here in our area. Not necessarily a great severe weather potential, but we will be keeping an eye on the counties south of I-16. So a lot to unpack here throughout the rest of the upcoming weekend. Most of it is on Sunday, and then as we head into the upcoming work week, a lot of this will die down. But a lot is also going to depend on the temperatures that we have here in our area when those start to dip below freezing. And like I mentioned earlier, we kind of have an all hands on deck situation. Our entire team will be in all day today. And right now I'm joined by meteorologist Alex Pry with more information on the forecast. Alex.
Yes, Ansley, everything you just said, you really knocked it out of the park. I'm just coming here to kind of give you a lot of supplemental information about some specifics in terms of the impacts, how much ice is going to be kind of dangerous and could start to cause some problems. But first and foremost, I'm going to run through a future view like Ansley just did, but we're going to take a zoomed in view and look at those specific temperatures. So here's a rough estimate of those numbers according to the graph model as of right now. We continue into the afternoon and we see those numbers get a little bit warmer, but it looks like mid and upper 40s for the most part. Farther down to the south, you could see some low 50s, but overall just a very gloomy day. But it still looks like a rain-free afternoon, and these numbers are obviously well too warm for seeing anything of the wintry form or frozen precipitation. Now as we go into the evening time frame, we start to see maybe a few spotty sprinkles, a little bit of a drizzle, kind of similar to what the forecast did feel as of yesterday afternoon if you did venture outside. Then we go into the nighttime hours. So this is going to be past sunset when the temperatures begin to cool down. The wedge does begin to be more profound as we go into that time frame, and you're going to see a wider cluster of moisture move in. This is going to be in the form of mainly some light and steady showers, maybe a few pockets of some heavier rain. But obviously, we start to see our northernmost counties start to see more of that rain transition into a freezing rain, maybe even a bit of a sleet mix. So that's what that pink color is going to indicate, a wintry mix, freezing rain or sleet, which we'll go over in more detail in just a moment. But but that's when we start to finally see those numbers dip below that magic 32-degree threshold. Overnight into the early morning hours tomorrow. So this is Sunday at 3 a.m. The northern half of central Georgia has a good mix of some rain and maybe something of the frozen nature, but the big takeaway is this is nothing in the way of snow showers like we did see on Future View as of this time last week when we were talking about early Sunday morning. But we go into the kind of later morning hours, still 6 a.m. pretty early in the day, and then a lot of those frozen precipitation chances start to taper off. Still our fair share of numbers that are right there around 32 or just slightly below it. And as we go into the late morning time frame, around 11 a.m. on Sunday, that's when the numbers warm back up above freezing temperatures. So this is going to be the beginning of the window where anything frozen at the surface is going to begin to melt. And I imagine it's going to melt very quickly. However, there is something that you do see on this zoomed in view, and that is the lack of sunshine. Cloud cover is very widespread. The numbers being above freezing will help contribute to the melting of anything frozen at the surface. However, not as quickly as it would if you did have some sunshine in the forecast, providing some extra warmth to that. But if you live farther down to the south, this is not going to be anything in the way of a winter weather concern for you whatsoever. Farther down to the south, you obviously see numbers in the 40s that actually climb into the 50s, upper 60s, maybe even the 70s by the time another round of moisture begins to move in. But take a look at the difference between Eatonton and Cordele. 37 degrees in Eatonton, 67 degrees all the way down in Crisp County. So the northernmost component of this line of showers and thunderstorms beginning to move in on Sunday afternoon could have a bit of a mixture, maybe even a little bit of a frozen nature to some of that precipitation. I think that's mainly going to be up on the I-85 corridor, maybe getting into upstate South Carolina. But that line of potential severe weather in the form of maybe a severe thunderstorm warning or two, and like Ansley mentioned, a brief spin-up tornado could also still be possible. That begins to move in around 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon, very widespread right there around the 4 p.m. hour. And just like most of these systems, these squall line systems that do move through, that leading edge is going to be where the weather is most intense. Yes, you'll see plenty of rain behind that leading edge, but it's going to be a lot lighter and steadier in nature, and you're not going to have maybe as gusty of winds as you would have with that initial line. And that initial line begins to push out sometime around 6 to 7 p.m. Still holding on to a few shower chances as we go into 8 p.m. on Sunday, and then after that, the rain leaves the picture. Soon to follow will be the cloud cover, and that's what's going to contribute to that cool down back below freezing as we go into around 4 to 5 a.m. on Monday, all the way until we get to around 9 to 10 a.m. and that's when we're forecasted to get back above freezing temperature. So my main emphasis on that is it's going to be a period of a couple of hours on Monday morning that we will get back below freezing temperature. With the lack of sunshine, I imagine there will still be plenty of water that is sitting at the surface. So we could see the refreezing over of some of those bodies of water at the surface, mainly kind of just some shallow spots that are kind of some puddles that are lingering in the forecast. But that is going to be why we have the weather impact alert continuing into Monday morning for the potential for maybe some more slick spots on the roads and impacting your morning commute out to work and out to school as we go into Monday morning. So a lot of areas have seen some school cancellations. That's mainly for northern central Georgia, the areas that do get that wintry mix. Farther down to the south, I anticipate it to be more so just some rain. We could see a little bit of freezing over for our southernmost counties as we go Sunday night into Monday morning, but I imagine it's just going to kind of be some nuisance icing. But if anything is to sit on the ground for even longer than that, which I really don't have a lot of confidence in, we are going to drop well below freezing temperature as we go into Tuesday morning. This is 3 a.m. This is still about 4 hours ahead of time when we normally hit that coldest time of the morning, right there around sunrise. And we already have some temperatures in the low 20s. We are forecasting actually some upper teens as we go into early Tuesday morning. So Monday night into early Tuesday morning, we are going to have a longer time that we are below freezing temperature, and that would really result in the hard freezing over of anything that is still wet at the surface. But we will see plenty of sunshine Monday afternoon. I don't anticipate much of the impacts to be lingering until we get into Tuesday morning. But now let's go ahead and talk about your temperatures a little bit more, just with some colors to put this in a better picture. So throughout today, good gradient of some mid and upper 40s, maybe some low 50s for high temperatures. Then as we go overnight into tomorrow morning, there goes that wedge, very profound, dropping our numbers down to around freezing temperature. And again, north of Macon, we are going to see our fair share of numbers right there below freezing temperature, low 30s, 30, 31, maybe even some upper 20s. And as we go into the afternoon, Here comes that warm and humid air mass surging up to the north from the northern Gulf and is creating a fine temperature gradient. So the wedge is still very prominent in northeast Georgia. As you go down to south and southwest Georgia, there's a difference of nearly 40 degrees with some temperatures of Athens at 33 degrees and 72 all the way down in Valdosta. So that is also going to be a theme with our severe weather risk Sunday afternoon. Areas farther down to the south and the southwest are going to have a greater chance of some possible severe weather, maybe even the potential for something of a brief spin-up tornado. And then as we go into Sunday evening, these temperatures are actually warmer than they look to get throughout the afternoon as that warmer air mass does continue to push up to the north. But then after the frontal boundary drives through that will be causing this winter weather system, that will eventually cool us down as we start to see that colder air take over. Skies clear out into Monday morning. Going later into Monday morning, that's when we finally get back above that freezing temperature mark. For a brief moment into the afternoon, it's still going to be a chilly afternoon on Monday, don't get me wrong. And then we'll go into Monday evening, already starting to drop back to close to freezing temperature as early as 6 p.m. So it's going to be a frigid spell of weather as we go into the beginning of next week. So now here's what I was talking about when I was referring to that wintry mix category. So rain at higher levels of the atmosphere, it is going to be colder. So it's going to start out as the frozen nature, but rain is going to be where you start to have warmer layers of the atmosphere above 32 degrees, really close to where some of those frozen particles are forming. So it's going to fall all the way down as a liquid. Then you get into freezing rain and sleet. These are the two categories that we're referring to when we say a wintry mix. Freezing rain and sleet are a little bit different in the aspect that freezing rain, water is going to fall for a liquid for the most part, but once it reaches the surface, it's finally going to encounter a layer of the atmosphere down at the surface that is below freezing temperature. So freezing rain is going to be rain that just freezes once it hits the surface, and that's what leads to our ice accumulation problems. Sleet is a little bit of a better scenario. That's going to be water that falls as a liquid, but it freezes a little bit before it hits the surface, a little bit higher up in the atmosphere compared to surface level. And that is normally in the form of maybe just some tiny ice pellets that are kind of hitting you. They hurt a little bit. They do add a little bit of sting. I do remember that from last year, but they won't accumulate as much down on the surface. It will be a little bit harder for sleet to melt since it's going to be so compact together, and it can add extra concerns of maybe possibly lingering a little bit longer on the surface and maybe leading to some wet surfaces. But overall, sleet is not going to have the implications in the form of ice like freezing rain is. So that's the one that we're really going to be on the lookout for. And then of course you have your snow, which we were talking about a lot last week. Not going to be the case whatsoever. I will continue to emphasize that all morning, all into the evening, all into tomorrow morning. This is not a snow event. I know that's what all of us want, but we have not been talking about snow all throughout the week so far. This is an ice event. This is where you get into kind of the nastier scenario in terms of these winter weather impacts. So Ansley showed you this, our northernmost counties highlighted in that winter weather advisory, where an ice storm warning is in that dark purple color. So that extends all the way down to the I-20 corridor, counties along and just south of I-20. So the ice accumulation in the ice storm warning, 1/4 of an inch all the way up to an inch in nature. Our ice accumulation here in central Georgia is going to be up to around the 1/4 of an inch threshold. Maybe some areas that try to go a little bit higher than that, but that's going to be the tip top of areas like Jasper, Putnam, and Hancock counties, really as you get closer and closer to I-20. So it's not necessarily a fine line gradient. Weather doesn't obey those county borders that we give them with advisories and watches and warnings, but it is a good rough estimate. So in terms of how much ice can cause some problems, most of central Georgia, I would say maybe as far down as Warner Robins at the very farthest south, we could see some light glaze in terms of some ice. That's where you just really need to be careful walking and driving. A few slick spots on the roads, but overall not having much of an impact. I still think that you're going to be good to go as you go into Sunday morning in areas farther down to the south that are only forecasting a bit of a light glaze of ice. But then you get up to 1/4 of an inch, which is really just going to be a problem north of Macon. 1/4 of an inch of ice, that's where it begins to get problematic. Remember those totals I just showed you for northern Georgia? We were talking about up to an inch in some isolated spots. That is 4 times what it takes to have some problematic conditions in the form of ice. So that's why you are hearing the language historic, devastating, long-lasting for those potential impacts in northern Georgia. If you see a forecast from someone in the metro Atlanta area, that is a completely different forecast than what we do have here in central Georgia. These are the impacts we're looking at really at the most in northern central Georgia. Coated windshields and cars, some dangerous bridges that can be tough to stop on the roads. So bridges and overpasses are going to be the most susceptible to freezing over, but still we could see some of those slick spots on the roads in general as well. And that's where we can start to have things like trees and power lines start to fail. And we are going to expect some wind impacts as well. So if we have about 1/4 of an inch of ice that's around some branches on some trees, that's going to create more surface area for those gusty winds to continue to hit. That's going to create some heavier branches that are more susceptible to snapping and breaking and falling over. So the winds are also going to be a factor that leads into the downing of trees and power lines on top of the ice accumulation that we see. And we're not forecasting this about 1/2 inch of ice. That's where you have crippling impacts. That's where you're starting getting into the territory of where that wedge is most profound in north and northeastern central Georgia. Widespread tree damage and power line damage. Roads are completely impassable, so that means that utility vehicles, Georgia Power vehicles are going to be unable to get out on the roads to fix those down power lines and clear some of those trees that might have fallen. So that means no travel until that ice does finally begin to melt. And of course, the higher totals of ice that you have, the longer it does take to melt. And power outages could last for a couple of days. That's still northern Georgia, not here in central Georgia. We could have our fair share of power outages, but we're not expecting them to last for a long duration of time. Maybe some areas that are without power for as much as 24 hours, but not multiple days like northern and northeastern Georgia is looking at. But once again, the best piece of advice that I do have for you is just really try to stay off the roads for Sunday morning. Then I expect most of that ice to finally start to begin to break apart and start to melt in nature, and just not staying out on the roads. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give you. Number one, because obviously of those implications, the slick conditions, it is going to make it difficult to drive, but we'll start talking about how to drive on the ice when you learn how to drive in the sun first and foremost. So here's a look at the onset of impacts now. This is for the entire state of Georgia, and onset of impacts means the earliest time that we're going to start to see precipitation of the frozen nature. So northern and northwestern Georgia already seeing those impacts as of this morning, and then once we get into around the noon window to 8 p.m., that's where most of north and northeastern Georgia will start to see the earliest onset of impacts. I know that's a large window, but the main thing that this graphic emphasizes is that most of our impacts in central Georgia will begin at the 8 p.m. hour tonight at the earliest. Right now I'm anticipating more of around a 10 to 11 p.m. start of the transition of a lot of that rain into maybe more of a freezing rain and a sleet mixture. So that wintry mix is going to get going past 8 p.m. Main thing and main emphasis with this is, if you have anything you still need to do throughout your Saturday afternoon, go ahead and do it. Go grab a few extra groceries. Go grab a charging bank that you may need for your devices if you're anticipating some possible power outages in areas like Jasper, Putnam, Hancock counties. Now is going to be the time to do that, as most of your Saturday is still looking crystal clear in the form of not too much in the way of rain. It's still going to be chilly, it's still going to be gloomy, and you may have a few sprinkle showers, but we're not expecting that wintry precipitation until we get into the nighttime hours. But now let's transition into Sunday afternoon, where that day 2 storm outlook Ansley showed you, highlighting the potential threats for gusty winds, a strong, maybe even a severe thunderstorm or two, and within that we do have a brief spin-up tornado risk. Not to freak you out, we'll talk about it a little bit. Here's the potential according to our high-resolution model, the HRR model, and it shows that risk over to the west of us around Sunday morning. That risk creeps into southwest central Georgia as we go into the afternoon, starting around maybe 1 to 2 o'clock, continuing into the evening hours around 6 p.m. Honestly, I think that level 1 risk is really knocking it out of the park when it comes to highlighting the potential for maybe that severe weather risk. But this is something that we have with most of our level 1 risks. Not to really freak you out in terms of this, but this is just a risk that we want to continue to highlight because it is going to be a bit of a two-sided forecast, or a tale of two forecasts rather. So the main takeaways from everything I just showed you, everything I just yapped about for a good 10 to 15 minutes, as of this morning, most of Saturday looks good. Like I said, now is the window of where you need to get out and run those last minute errands before I do really recommend staying inside for the morning hours into Sunday. Maybe as you get into the afternoon on Sunday, you could venture out, but then that's when it's going to get a bit loud and a bit windy outside. So the risk for wintry weather, so wintry mix and ice accumulation, is overnight tonight into Sunday morning. That's mainly going to be Macon, farther to the north, but not just that fine line right there at Macon. We could see a little bit of nuisance icing, those light glaze categories that are going to create some slick spots. So my recommendation is really from Houston County farther to the north. Just drive with a little bit of caution if you are going to be out on the roads on Sunday morning. But like I said, I do not recommend it if you are going to have a time this weekend to maybe try to fine tune where you should be staying inside. I think Sunday afternoon will warm up, start to see a lot of that ice melt in nature, but then we're going to have the severe weather farther down in south central Georgia. So south central Georgia is not looking at those winter weather impacts. If you live down in Lawrence County, Dodge County, Wilcox, Bleckley, over to Macon County, Dooley, Crisp County, you are not looking at a winter weather impact from this system. But what you are looking at is Sunday afternoon. We have the possibility of a strong to severe thunderstorm, and along with that, just some general heavy showers. But that is going to be farther to the south. So it's a bit of a tale of two forecasts. Like I said, northernmost counties have the chance for some winter weather. Southernmost counties just going to deal with a typical system like we normally do see maybe in the springtime and getting into the summertime. So over the next 3 days, what can you expect? The weather impact alert going to go from later today, really starting tonight, all the way through Sunday for both the implications of seeing that severe weather and the implications of seeing that winter weather in the morning hours. And right now we are continuing the weather impact alert into the first half of your Monday in light of anything that could freeze back over. We very well might end the weather impact alert a little bit earlier if we're not seeing any reports of anything icing back over as we go into early Monday morning. Again, it's only a small window of time, maybe 5 to 6 hours at most, where we are going to be back below freezing temperature, and that's only going to be a couple of areas in central Georgia. That's not going to be very likely all of central Georgia. And then as we transition into next week, like I mentioned, a big time cold spell is coming. 28 for a morning low on Monday. That drops down 11 more degrees as we go into Tuesday morning, where we have a low temperature of 17 degrees forecasted, and then 21 degrees as you go into Wednesday morning. So it's going to be well below average and maybe the most significant cold spell we have seen so far of the winter season. So one last time, weather impact alert later today, mainly starting in the nighttime hours on Saturday, all the way through your Monday morning. The impact is that potential wintry mix, which is now more so looking like a likely wintry mix for our northernmost counties and those possible ice accumulations that we could see. But now we are adding the potential for some severe weather into that weather impact category. That's going to be for our southernmost counties. Once again, it really depends on where you are located, where you're traveling to, maybe throughout early today, or where you do live. Because if you live down to the south, you're not going to look at any of these wintry weather impacts. What you need to continue to do, stay up to date with us. We are going to be working around the clock all throughout this weekend, myself and Ansley Parker, through the rest of this morning into the early afternoon. David Guerrero and Ben Jones will be in later on tonight. And then as we go into early tomorrow morning, Ansley Parker and I will be picking back up coverage, and David and Ben will be wrapping up coverage as we go into Sunday evening for any potential, maybe severe thunderstorm warnings that we see. So it's a very eventful first 3 days of your 7-day forecast, but then after that, we are just welcoming Old Man Winter back into the forecast, and we'll keep the cold air in the forecast as we go into next weekend, but it is looking like a very dry stretch of weather Monday through Friday that will hopefully lead to any melting of any accumulations of anything frozen at the surface.